Alright, hello again. This is Jeff Scott. I've been coming at you with HTML5 and CSS3 from the Muroc HTML5 and CSS3 5th edition text. We are in Chapter 7 right now, and Chapter 7 is how to work with lists and links. So we want to be able to create links and lists in all their variations with HTML and then format them accordingly with CSS. Name and describe the three types of HTML lists. Describe the use of or anchor elements for linking to another web page, opening another web page in a new browser, linking to placeholders on the same page, linking to media files, starting an email message, calling a phone number, or starting a Skype session. Describe the use of unordered lists and anchor elements for the creation of navigation lists and navigation menus, including 2- and 3-tier menus. Describe the use of these pseudo classes for formatting links. Link, visited, hover, and focus, which we have talked about in a previous chapter. Describe the use of these CSS properties for formatting links, text decoration, and border. Alright, we looked at this in an earlier, you may or may not remember, we looked at UL and the LI that goes with it. In fact, I've got this here someplace. I don't need that one anymore. Let's see. Now these are all San Joaquin Valley things. But if I do open, I think it was Chapter 3 index. There we go. And if we go back to here and I uncomment this, so if I come in here and put a P tag right here, bring that up, and then end the P tag, there is an unordered list. Again, an unordered list, typically you set one of those up because, as mentioned, there's no semblance of order in there. Okay? So, with the example that we have right here, and I don't need that now. Alright, we should be able to save this and run it. I've got the picture of Birdie that we really don't need, but here are the members of my family when we're using an unordered list, and here are the members of my family when we're using an ordered list. Alright. So the UL in there stands for unordered list. The LI that's in there stands for list item. By default, an unordered list is a bulleted list, but you can change that, and I think we talk about that in just a bit. An LI element typically contains text, but it can hold other elements such as links, alright, paragraphs, other lists, whatever it is you need for it to hold. Alright. There's an example. Ordered list, same kind of way, but it's OL instead of UL. Now notice here they told it to start with 4. Alright, why? Because they're giving you the steps before you start WinZip, and there's the 3 steps. But notice, since they wanted to put another H2 tag in there, they ended the list. So they're starting a new one here, but to say start by 4, this basically looks like it's all part of the same list. So that's what you get. So by default, an ordered list is displayed as a numbered text, but again, you can change that, and we'll look at that in a bit. The start attribute can be used to continue numbering from one list to another, and that's what they're showing in there. You can also have a nested list, which is, of course, an ordered list or an unordered list inside of another ordered list or unordered list. Okay? When you nest lists by coding one list inside, you can nest a list by putting one inside of another. When you nest an unordered list in another, within another list, the default bullet is going to be a circle. There's another kind, and I very rarely, if ever, see this type of unordered list, but just so you do hear about it. It's called a definition list, but over the years it's kind of evolved to where it's called a description list. As you can see, it has 3 elements as shown there on page 247. There is a DL, which creates a description list, a DT, which creates a term for the description list, and a DD, which does a description. All right. In the past, some people have used those, and if you see what it looks like here, some people like that kind of use for a glossary or whatever. So again, back in HTML4, this was called a definition list. It's now referred to as a description list. I'm not going to say another word about that just because I don't use them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them, but I just don't use them. All right. So, all right, how to format lists. Notice there's a list style type, which determines the type of the list, a bullet that's used in the list, and those are the possible values right there. And there's a list style image, which is the URL for an image that's used as the bullet. So in English, what they're saying is you can set the list style type to any of these. Disk, circle, square, or none. But for list style image, you put your own image in there, so it's going to look more like this. All right, notice with a circle, that is a circle that's not filled in. If you want the filled in circle, you say disk, and disk is the default, I believe. Same thing with an unordered list. I mean, I'm not going to run through these, but for an ordered list rather, notice the default is decimal. You can do decimal with a leading 0, lowercase alpha, uppercase alpha, lowercase Roman, or uppercase Roman. So you've got plenty of different things to choose from. So you can change the numbering style using again the list style type property, where the default again is decimal. All right. Next, starting on page 252, the author discusses how to change the alignment of list items. You can change the margins and paddings to control the indentation for the items in an ordered or an unordered list, and to control the space between the bullets and the numbers of the text that follows. You can also use margins and paddings to remove indentation from a list. However, this doesn't work as well with an ordered list because the numbers are aligned to the right. You can remove the indentation from the descriptions in a description list by setting the left margin of the descriptions to 0. As it says on the bottom of page 253, these techniques work best if you specify padding and margins using M's. Hyperlinks start on page 254, and the author talks here about how to link to another page. There are 4 attributes that you can put in at a minimum, I guess, or at a maximum probably, for an A element. Most people use only the href, all right, which is a hypertext reference. It can be a relative URL, it can be an absolute URL. You can also add a title in there if you're so inclined, and that description is displayed as a tooltip. Again, you may want to consider doing that as far as for accessibility. You know, if the link is going to be short for accessibility, code the title element attribute to clarify where the link is going. You should also code the title attribute if a link includes an image, because again, if you've got someone who's site deficient, that's not going to be helping them much. You can add a tab index to set the tab order for the links, starting with 0. Or you can put a negative value in to take it out of the tab index. Finally, you can set up an access key, which is like a control something or an alt something in order to do that. So you use the A element to create a link that loads a web page, typically another web page from the one that you're in. The content of an A element can be text, image, text, an image, or text and an image. Okay? An access key, again, is a keystroke combination that's used to activate a link. Alright. How to format links on page 256 and 257. Now, we've talked about these before. I don't know if it was the last chapter or the one before, but it was fairly recently. These are called the Css Pseudo Classes. The colon link is for the link that has not yet been visited. If you don't reset it, it defaults to blue. The colon visited is a link that has been visited already. Again, the default is purple. The colon hover is when you're pushing down on the mouse, but you haven't clicked. You're clicking on the mouse, but you haven't let go yet. And I think the default is red. The focus is an element like a link or a form control that has the focus. And active is the element that's currently active. Notice that the default color of that is red. But again, all that stuff can be changed using CSS. Text decoration is typically used to remove the underlining from a link. So you say text decoration colon none. And border style can be used to remove a border from an image link. Alright. So you can set it to none. And I think you can also set the width to 0. As far as accessibility for links, apply the same formatting for the hover and focus. That way, whether you mouse over the link or not, you're going to get the same experience. Now again, there are plenty of examples in the book here. There's just not the time, and to be honest with you, I don't have the inclination to go over all of them, but there are some really good examples in here. Alright, if you look up on the slide here, it says target equals underscore blank, and the underscore blank is in double quotes. Alright, what that means is whatever you put there, in this case, this HTML5test.com should open in a brand new window. So you can use the target attribute of the anchor tag to specify where the document referred to in the link should be loaded. Again, in a new browser window or tab, it's underscore blank. And as far as that goes, what's important about that is good netiquette says, net etiquette says that if you are opening up a link from your website and that link is not part of your website, you should always open that link up using underscore blank. It just makes sense. Okay. Besides displaying another page, you can code links that jump to locations in the same page. Perhaps you've seen that before, where you've got a hyperlink all over the place that says top. So for instance, if you wanted to go to if you wanted to go to the top, okay, well, this is a good example they put in here. 8 reasons why trainers like our books. So notice that all 8 of the links are shown right there, and if you click on any of them, you go to that particular reason. So to do this, to create a placeholder, you use the ID attribute of the A tag, and I think that's going to be shown here. There you go. And top is a common word to use. If you want to go to the top, that's where you'd set it. To jump to a placeholder, you code the link with its href attribute set to the value of the ID attribute. All right. So notice ID, for example, here equal reason 6, and then for that paragraph you say href equals reason 6. Okay. Again, I've said this many times before, but the way you learn this, and I don't hold any grandiose notions here, but the way that you learn this is to literally start up a page, a blank page, and just keep putting different things in there. Test this, try this, just to see what happens. That's going to be how, in the end, that's going to be how you learn. Alright, it may also be that you want to link to a media file. So you can link to a PDF, to a WAV file, to an MP3, a SWIFT file, etc. And they talk about some of the popular media players. So I think it's a later chapter where we'll actually go over media players. Alright, but special media players may be required to play a media file in the browser. Often, media players require browser plugins for playing specific types of files. When you use the anchor element to display a media file, the file is typically displayed in its own web page. To help the browser determine which player to use, you can include a type attribute in the anchor element and specify a MIME type if you want to do that. Here's an example of going to a PDF. There you go. Examples of going to an MP3 or to a PowerPoint file. Alright, a couple more examples here. How to create email, phone, and Skype links. The big thing with email, and probably you know this, or maybe you know this, is as it says there, you use the mail tool. In fact, I put that, if you ever look at the bottom in the announcement that I have on every one of my classes, I'll say please email Jeff Scott, and it'll be the underscore. Alright, and it'll say in there, basically it'll be a mail to, and then the mail tool will be mail to jscott@blackhawk.edu inside of double quotes. Now the tell one is interesting because oftentimes you want to do that, because remember, if it turns out that the person is looking at your site through a mobile device, especially if it's a phone, having a tell in there like that can basically set it up so they'll be able to make a phone call. The Skype session, this is the one I've never tried, but it says to start a Skype session, you code the name of the user you want to contact following the Skype prefix. Again, that's one I have never tried. Alright, next on 266 we go to creating navigation menus. So the chapter closes by showing how to use lists and links in the navigation menus for your web pages. Alright, the preferred way typically of doing this is to code anchor elements for a navigation within an unordered list. So the figure that you see right here shows how to create a vertical navigation menu. Now, to be honest with you, in many ways the horizontal is more in vogue today. So if you look here, okay, I think you see more like this, but again, it's kind of like wide ties, narrow ties type of thing. That one might be in vogue for a while, and then for some reason the other one becomes in vogue. So the HTML for the vertical navigation menu is actually shown here. It's best coded as a series of anchor elements within the LI elements of an unordered list. If you want to make the entire box that you saw here, the entire box, if you put it like that, if you want to make the whole thing clickable, you can set the display property for the A elements to block and then use padding to provide space around the links. To show users what page they're on, it's a good practice to highlight the current link by doing something along the lines of providing a different background color to it. But you have to do this as a combination of HTML and the associated CSS. So when you're going through assignments and stuff in here and you get lost on something, the strong recommendation is that you take a step back and you take a look at the examples that are in here, because they are really, really well done. Alright, here are two different horizontal menus. You can code horizontal menus again by using an unordered list. You do that by displaying the LI elements, but by displaying them inline or by floating them. If you want to set up a two-tier menu, and let's face it, you might very well need something like that, alright, or a sub-menu, however you want to call it, you code unordered lists within the LI elements of another unordered list. In other words, you create a nested unordered list, and they show you an example of that in here. And sometimes, again, hopefully this makes sense to you, this is going to involve a little bit of trial and error. All right, if you've never done it before, you know, but after you've done it a few times, it usually makes pretty much sense of what to do and how to do it. If you need to, you can go to 3 tiers, and they show this. All right, so that's a a sub menu type of thing, a sub menu under a sub menu, and Tier 1 is the navigation bar. Tier 2 is the drop down when the user hovers over an item in the navigation bar, speakers in this case. And Tier 3 is after you've chosen a speaker, it's one of the dates that the speaker spoke at. So again, you've got an unordered list within an unordered list within an unordered list. So the CSS for that is shown on page 275. The actual HTML is on 273 and here, and the CSS is on 275. To add more tiers to a menu system, you just continue to add the logic. Alright, so we finished Chapter 7. And once you've completed the chapter, you should have a good idea of how to use lists, be they ordered lists or unordered lists, and you should have a good idea how to use links. Alright? So this chapter makes a really good reference, in other words. Okay, that's pretty much it then for this chapter. And I don't know what I was doing there, but when we come back, I've got 2 chapters to go, and they are Chapter 5 on how to use the box model and Chapter 6 on how to use CSS for page layout. Be back with one of those 2 shortly.